Do you want to build strength for wheel pose? In this video, we're going to show 8 strength for yoga exercises that you can use to build strength to do wheel pose.
Yes, and we have a separate video that's called The Complete Guide to Wheel Pose. And in that video, we break down the anatomy and biomechanics of wheel, and we offer some really good modifications for just making the pose a little more accessible for you today. But then today, we are talking in this video about how to build strength for wheel pose, urdhva dhanurasana, how to build strength over time with some of our favorite exercises.
Exactly.
And another cool thing about these exercises, right, is that they're all body weights.
They are all body weight. So you can do these right within your yoga practice or around your yoga practice without needing any other equipment.
Right, exactly.
Besides maybe a couple yoga blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So our first exercise is the prone thoracic spine extension. And for this exercise, we like to have a block on the upper back / neck to kind of lock in that relationship so that all of the movement is coming from the thoracic spine, the upper back. So it's not going to be a huge range of motion, but it is a very isolated movement to that upper back. And Jenny just lifts up a couple inches, pauses for a second at the top, and repeats for a bunch of reps.
And Travis, isn't it cool to use the block because there can be a tendency when we're lifting up like that to kind of lift at the neck and like extend at the neck, which isn't bad.
Right.
But when we're really trying to target.
Yeah, we're just trying to focus on that thoracic spine here, which is one segment of the full spinal extension that we use in wheel.
Exactly. So the block is rad. Do we have a second strength exercise?
Our second exercise is prone I raises, like the letter I. So Jenny will have her arms straight up overhead. This is another good one for the block. So hands are hugging into the block, and then she raises her arms up into shoulder flexion. So shoulder flexion is the position of the shoulders in wheel with the arms overhead, and this is an active end range lift to work those muscles that do that position. So again, it's not a huge range of motion. Jenny happens to have a very nice expression of that position, but when I do it, when you do it, maybe you only raise the blocks and the block an inch or two off the floor.
Right.
And pause for a second at the top and feel that work in the backs of the shoulders.
Yes, and it can be a great one because it helps improve like active control and also just flexibility in shoulder flexion, which is a requirement in wheel.
Exactly.
So yay, that's our second.
Number 3 is the reverse table lift. So this one, the lower body is really what is looking like with the wheel shape, whereas the upper body is a little bit different. But Jenny just starts in that table position and then lifts her hips up. So she's getting some good work through the quads and through the hamstrings and the glutes in a shape that kind of resembles wheel pose. If she wanted to make it more challenging, like to get more ready for wheel, she could just lift one leg at a time and do the exercise repeatedly on one side to put more work into that leg.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is like a good one for targeting like the lower half of the body in wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Reverse table lifts.
Yes. Our next exercise, we're going to go to the upper body. This one is the bear tricep extension. So the triceps are a really big contributor to wheel pose for straightening the arm to get into that full position. So bear tricep extensions are neat because they work the triceps, but we also get some quads, fronts of the thighs at the same time. So Jenny's in bear, which is like a hovering tabletop. She lowers and lifts her elbows to the floor. This is much harder than it looks, all the while keeping those knees off the ground. If that position is not available to you, or that exercise is a little bit too challenging today, you can start in bear and you can lower
your knees down.
Yeah,
right?
You can lower your knees down to press up. And then once you get to the top, you can hover the knees and lower down because we're often stronger in that eccentric or lowering phase. So you do the knees off the ground for the lower, you put the knees back down, and then you press up with the knees down.
Yeah, this can be a great way to make it more accessible. If doing up and down doesn't quite work out, then just focus on the down.
Yes. Our next exercise, our fifth exercise, is the down dog push-up. So this is also an upper body one. And we all know down dog, but maybe you've never done this variation before where Jenny taps her head in between her hands. So this is kind of akin to an overhead press in the strength training world where we might hold dumbbells or kettlebells or a bar, but we can do this just with our body weight. And so Jenny slowly lowers her head towards the floor and then presses back up.
That's right. And that's super relevant for wheel because wheel is
the same thing.
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
like this instead of face down.
Right.
If we wanted to make this a little bit even harder and more wheel specific due to the deeper range of motion that we initiate wheel from the floor, we can raise our hands up onto yoga blocks. Now, when Jenny goes down, her head can actually go lower than her hands and it makes it more challenging.
And I have to say that at least for me, that's very challenging. And when I demoed it, I don't think I went like as far as one.
I don't think the head quite tapped the floor.
The head didn't go
But you don't have to. You could aspire to tap the head on the floor. But any deeper that you get in the floor is added benefit towards that initiation of movement.
Exactly.
Our next exercise, our second to last exercise, our third to last exercise is wall reaches. So for this one, you can progress this like according to your ability. So the closer you start to the wall, the easier this is going to be. So Jenny reaches up and back. She slowly lowers towards the wall, taps the wall and comes back. She can look at the wall too as she goes. So what this is doing is it's kind of like if you turned the video sideways, Jenny's basically going into a very wheel-like shape. But she happens to be doing it a quarter turn to gravity. So you can see she's walking out and making it harder. Wow. She's controlling that eccentric extension, and then she's concentrically bringing herself back to standing. So this is working the entire front line, like abdominals all the way down through hip flexors, through quadriceps, and she is also getting some shoulder flexion range of motion work as well.
Totally. And maybe some spinal extension mobility.
Right.
Because you're just working to actively like arc into that shape.
Yeah. So that might seem like kind of the opposite of what we do in wheel because we're like actively extending, but building some strength in the abs, I think helps to give people the feeling of more space when they're in wheel. Like if you feel really crunched through the low back, then being able to control some of that through the abs, through the abdominal engagement can help you feel some more freedom.
More support like all the way around the spine or something.
Yep.
So those are wall reaches. They're one of my favorites. And what's next?
Our seventh exercise is called Monty Wolford squats, named after the creator of this squat variation.
But you might know this exercise by a different name that we don't need to say what that name is.
Yes. So Jenny's set up next to the wall just for a little bit of balance. You could be next to a chair or whatever you have to just lightly rest the fingers on. And then she slowly descends down and taps her knees to blocks. The blocks just give her a target and also so she doesn't have to go quite as deep. And you don't necessarily have to go all the way to the floor, especially if we're talking about building strength for wheel because the top of the wheel isn't in such deep knee flexion. But she's going nice and slow. She's keeping the long spine, so she's leaning back as she dives the knees forward. And that is a huge quadriceps builder, fronts of the thighs, which are the muscles that are working in the lower body and wheel. I
feel that the Monty Wolford is very potent for the quads. And something you mentioned when we were talking about this exercise specifically for wheel was that doing a Monty Wolford squat where you really emphasize the lower, like slow down the lower, because you could also do it a little fast, like you could just tap down and come up. But if you slow down the lower, you were saying that's a little more wheel specific because wheel is isometric.
Right. So like the slower you go in an eccentric, it almost becomes like a quasi isometric.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the Monty Wolford squat. Super good. And then we have one more.
Just one more. So this is the crowning exercise. This is going to be the exercise that looks the most like wheel because it's the initiation essentially of wheel. So we call this wheel head taps. And what Jenny does is she sets up for her wheel, but instead of going all the way up into her wheel, she goes, I don't know, a quarter of the way up into wheel, taps her head on the floor, and then comes back down. And she'll do this for reps. So the head tap just gives you like a, here's how high I need to lift to tap my head onto the floor. And then you can return to the start position. So this is practicing that initiation or start of wheel, which is probably there are two really hard parts of wheel: the beginning, where you're just getting yourself off the floor, and then the top of the wheel and holding it. So being able to do that over and over again, I think is really good.
Exactly, like focusing on the initiation phase. Yeah, I really like those head taps. And just the light tap of your head just gives you a little target, like something to aim for. And then once you feel that, you can come back down. Mm-hmm. But yeah, wheel specific and also a really great one. I mean, if you did all 8 of these exercises,
that would be like a full workout.
It totally would. And also like a body weight. Like Travis and I in Strength for Yoga, we love using actual weights, and we do in a lot of our programming. But specifically for wheel, there's a lot you can do that does not require weights.
At least 8 exercises. So I think that actually was like a pretty full body. I mean, we had upper body, we had lower body, we had core. So you could do those 8 exercises as a workout, like in that order maybe, and maybe do that once or twice a week if you're really working towards wheel. Yeah. Or you could just pull bits and pieces and put them, around your yoga practice, into your yoga practice, or before or after it, and practice that consistently over a few weeks or months, and I think you'll see a big difference.
Exactly. So this wraps up our presentation on how to build strength for wheel pose, strength for yoga style. And if you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all the tips that I and we share.